And last, but certainly not least, it's time to do the season preview of the defending MLS Cup champion, the Seattle Sounders. So the Seattle Sounders last season, they finished with a record of 16, 8, and 10 and had 56 points. They scored 51 goals, conceded 49, and had a goal differential of +2. So despite the fact that they actually finished second in the Western Conference, they were kind of right in the middle of the pack in terms of the goals scored and the goal allowed mark, and that they only had a +2 goal differential despite the fact that they finished second. And it's not very often that you finish second in the Western Conference and you're one of the best team in the Western Conference and you only have like a +2 goal differential and you have kind of mediocre number in terms of goal scoring and goals allowed throughout the season. But that's what the Sounders did last season, and it's quite impressive that they, of course, was able to achieve that mark. As I mentioned, they won MLS Cup last season, and they got eliminated in the fourth round of the U.S. Open Cup. And even if you don't watch the U.S. Open Cup, you probably can guess who they got eliminated in the U.S. Open Cup. Yep, that's right. It is the Portland Timbers, and that it feels like every single season when the Sounders play in a U.S. Open Cup, 9 out of 10 times it's going to be against the Portland Timbers in the first game of the U.S. Open Cup. And this is why there's always been a lot of discussion about the fact that they need to change the format in terms of the U.S. Open Cup, where in the early rounds when MLS team play, it shouldn't just be about geographic difference. I mean, I understand the reason why they do it is because they don't want teams to travel so far away for a midweek game that not a lot of team really kind of really take it seriously and just kind of play their kits with. But if we're going to have like a Portland versus Seattle US Open Cup every single time in the early round, as much as this is the biggest rivalry in MLS, and I know El Trafico fans and I know LAFC and Galaxy fans are going to be mad that I say the Cascadia Derby is the biggest rivalry in MLS, mainly because they feel like their rivalry is started to really boost up. But keep in mind, this is a rivalry that is the oldest in MLS and probably really one of the most fierce in MLS history. As much as we love to see that happen, if this happens every time in the US Open Cup, eventually it's just going to get old, and especially when both teams are not even playing their absolute best or not even putting out their absolute best roster. There's just no point into having them playing every single year. Like if they play once a year in the US Open Cup and then they play or once every like 3 or 4 years in the US Open Cup, then that's fine, but not every single year. So hopefully this season, if both of these teams meet in the US Open Cup, or if Seattle is going to be playing their first opponent in the US Open Cup, better not be the Portland Timbers, because if it is the case, here we go again. Seattle versus Portland in the US Open Cup, and I have a feeling whoever is going to win that game might actually get themselves in a deep run in the US Open Cup, and whoever loses that game will most likely, well, not most likely, but pretty much eliminate themselves in terms of trying to win the US Open Cup that year. But anyway, just a little rant about the US Open Cup. Now getting back to the season preview and talk about the players that they got. They didn't make a lot of addition this offseason, but they didn't really need to because their squad is still pretty decent, and they brought back pretty much everybody from that MLS Cup team from last season, except a couple of players in the back line. But they brought in Stefan Cleveland from the Chicago Fire, Shane O'Neill from Orlando City, João Paulo, who is their who is their third DP that they signed from this off season, and then they recently just added Yuma Gomez Andrade to kind of help out in terms of that back line and maybe add in a little bit more depth in terms of that back line. Now, in terms of the players that they lost this offseason, most of these guys are kind of depth pieces that they lost, and a couple of players that usually don't see a lot of action. But there's also guys that did see a lot of action, and that most of these guys that did see a lot of action are in the back line. So we have Brian Meredith, who actually went to Inter Miami, but now plays with Seattle's other Cascadia rival, or shall I say, forgotten Cascadia rival, the Vancouver Whitecaps. They also lost Jonathan Campbell, Sat Abdul Salon, who I believe he's now with FC Cincinnati, Roman Torres, who's now with Inter Miami, Victor Rodriguez, now playing in a second division team in Spain, Luis Silva, Kim Ki-hee, Brad Smith, who they of course weren't able to purchase his option, and that's kind of interesting to see that why they decide to not purchase his option. And then I think back in one of the News of the Week episode, I kind of had a theory why the Sounders decide not to purchase Brad Smith, because I feel like they were thinking that, well, since Brad Smith only have 1 year left in his contract with Bournemouth, and since now he's loaned with Cardiff City, let's wait until that loan with Cardiff City is over, and that we can potentially bring him back on a free transfer, which that would be an absolute smart move by this Sounders organization. The only problem is, what if Cardiff City decided to kind of nick him on a free transfer, or what if Bournemouth decided to extend his contract? Because if they extend his contract, they basically just going to have to buy him or ask Bournemouth for another loan for Brad Smith if he is going to be coming back for the Sounders. And then lastly, they lost Emmanuel Ciccini as one of the player that is no longer with this team. And actually, that's pretty much the final player that they lost throughout this season. But in terms of goals scored for this Sounders team, obviously it's got to be Raul Ruidiaz. I mean, he is probably one of the most lethal goal scored in this league, and I won't be surprised heading into I think this is his third season in MLS, because I remember they bought him back in the middle of 2018. I think he's going to once again have a spectacular season and probably even score more than 15 to 20 goals this season. Playmaker, Nicholas Ladero, one of the most lethal playmaker in this team and regularly in the conversation of potentially winning MLS MVP. So I expect him to be once again be very decent this year. In terms of MVP, I'm also going to go with Nicholas Ladero, although there is kind of a conflict between whether should I choose Raul Ruidiaz, Nicholas Ladero, or even potentially choose Christian Rodon to throw his name into that list. I'm just going to choose Nico Ladero because, again, most of the time when I do the season preview, the playmaker are usually going to be the MVP, because not only they are the guy that can be the playmaker and can set up beautiful passes to their teammates to score goals, but sometimes they can also be a lethal goal scorer, and Nicholas Ladero is basically both of them. He not only could be a lethal playmaker and could really truly represent of what a number 10 would do, but he can also score banging goals and score crucial goals to really give the Seattle Sounders a resort or a win. Surprise package, I'm actually going to go with Harry Shipp and Will Bruin, and I'm pretty sure Sounders fans probably have heard of both of these players because they are really the fan favorite of this team. And even though both of these guys don't usually get starting minutes, and both of these guys usually come off the bench, whenever they get some game times, you will know for sure that both of these guys will be very decent, and they will just work their socks off whenever they get starting minutes. I mean, these two guys are some of the most hardworking player on this team, and it's no wonder why the Sounders not only decided to keep them for a long period of time, but I don't think neither of these players is ever going to leave the Seattle Sounders. I mean, both of these players, again, they're fan favorites from the Sounders fan base, and I can really see both of them retire as a Sounders if they elected to do that. Now, what do I like about the Sounders team? Well, the core is still pretty much intact, and they are pretty much ready for another MLS Cup run. Like, when you look at this roster, it looked like this is going to be a roster that once again could challenge to make it back to MLS Cup. And they did it last time when they won MLS Cup in 2016, where the very next year, they went back to the same competition, and they actually faced the same team that they just beat MLS Cup, which is Toronto FC, and I have a feeling they can, of course, do it again, although, you know, the Western Conference is definitely getting much better than last season. Well, last season the Western Conference was really on a rise. This season it is going to be an absolute dogfight in terms of some of these top teams in the Western Conference, and it'll be interesting to see if the Sounders are going to be the one that's going to end up in the top, and that there's definitely a lot of teams that the Sounders need to try to beat either in the playoffs or try to beat in the regular season if they want to get themselves near the top of the table to set themselves in a good position of making up another deep playoff run. Now, the one big question that they have this upcoming season is, well, first of all, they have the MLS Cup hangover, although I don't know why I put that there because, as I just mentioned, they won MLS Cup back in 2016, and then the very next year they went back to the same they went back to the same game and went back to MLS Cup final. So I don't think hangover should be a big issue. I just only put it there because that's something that a lot of people always talk about with teams that won a title, and that, you know, in the beginning of the season, is there going to be that cup final feeling? And, you know, these kind of MLS Cup final or any kind of title hangover does exist. I mean, you look at all the teams that won titles in not just MLS, but in any sports here in the US, the very next year, they sometimes have a tough time to try to know that, you know, we have to hit the reset button because not only we want to defend our title, but we got to know that last season, you know, as much as we were on cloud nine, we need to do it again heading into this season. And the psychological part of that is definitely not very easy. And we have seen a lot of teams, not just in MLS, but in other leagues around here in the States, where they might finish top that year and they might win the title, and then the very next year they either get an early playoff exit or don't even make the playoffs the very next season. Although I don't think that's going to be the case with this Sounders team. I would be surprised if they don't make the playoffs, since they have never missed the playoffs in their franchise history, and they become only one of 3 teams in MLS right now to have never missed the playoffs. But the real big question with the Sounders team has to be their defense. And, you know, I know they did add some defensive reinforcement this offseason, but they also lost some key defensive pieces like Roman Torres, Brad Smith, and also Kim Ki-hee. And this back line will definitely look a little bit different. I'm assuming this back line, you know, there's been a lot of discussion of whether or not if Yamir Gomez Andrade is probably going to be one of the players that's going to be slot in as a center back. And my answer to that question is probably yes. I think he's going to be one of the defender there. He's going to be there alongside with Gustav Svensson potentially. And then you also got like the fullback situation where, you know, Brad Smith, who is exactly going to fill into his role. I'm guessing maybe it could be Jovan Jones fill in that role, or Calvin Leardam. And also the fullbacks area, that does have an area that I do kind of have a little bit of uncertainty, and that I think if there's one area the Sounders don't really have a lot of depth, is probably in terms of the fullbacks they have. But that's okay, because not a lot of teams in this league have a lot of good depth in terms of the fullback position. But just the reason why I say it's uncertainty in the defense is they're probably going to have a new look in terms of the back line that is different from previous seasons, and it's going to be interesting to see if it's going to be just as good as it is the case for previous season. But yeah, there you have it. That is pretty much it for my season preview for the Seattle Sounders. If you guys enjoyed this video, make sure you guys leave a like and smash that subscribe button. If you're a Sounders fan, what do you think of the player that you added and the players that is no longer with this team after this offseason? Who's the goal scorer, the playmaker, the MVP, and the surprise package? What do you like about this team, and what is one big question that you have with team? But yeah, hope you guys enjoyed this video, and also, there we have it. We have just finished with all the season preview in terms of previewing all 26 teams heading into the beginning of the season, and we actually did it with just one day to spare before I go to Vegas for that business trip. Although by the time you, of course, are able to watch this video, and by the time you can able to access it, it probably would be like Tuesday when you can first access this video, because this video is a pre-record. And so far for the past couple of season preview video, I had to pre-record these videos because since I'm going to be going to Vegas, and since I don't have time to record a video during that time, and there's going to be a bit of a gap between those days where I can make a video, these are the videos that is going to be cover those gaps that they have. And since I have an extra day to kind of get ready for my business trip to Vegas, I might even think about making a video tomorrow doing the prediction of the Eastern Conference, because once I finish all the season preview, this is when I start doing the predictions for both of the conference. And in fact, I'll probably do exactly that, where I'm going to do the prediction for the Eastern Conference, and then when I get back from my business trip, I'll do the prediction for the Western Conference, and then we do the preview for the very first week of the MLS season. And I'll probably either think about maybe splitting that preview into two, or maybe just do one big preview. I'll probably decide by next week what I'm gonna do. But yeah, it is exciting time. I mean, I'm honestly very excited about not only the season about to begin, but also the fact that I was able to accomplish previewing all 26 teams in such a short amount of time. I mean, it was just, what, a week and a half ago that I started this preview, and I was very nervous that I wasn't able to get every single team done before I go on this Vegas business trip. But here I am, finished with every team with just 1 day to spare before I go to Vegas for my business trip. And you know, if you guys been watching all these videos, I thank you so much for this support, and certainly hope you guys enjoy all the previews that I've done for all 26 team in MLS. But either way, hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I of course will see you guys next time, and I of course will see you guys tomorrow for the prediction of the Eastern Conference.